In the first few chapters of the book of Luke, we read about the family of Yeshua. We read about Yeshua's birth. We read about his father, Joseph, his mother, Mary. We also read about his mother's cousin, Elizabeth. And I want to talk to you today for just a minute about these two very unique Jewish women. Mary, very young. She could have been as young as 12. Elizabeth, the scripture tells us, is on in age. She's an older woman, which means she was probably about 30, maybe 28. Yeah, she was an older woman. But these were two very incredible, very unique Jewish women, both of them in very unusual, very difficult circumstances. Of course, Mary just learned that she is with child, without a husband, putting her in an unconscionable situation. And then we have Elizabeth, whose husband has lost his voice. He's been rendered mute by God. And I can't help but think that the rumor mill in that community was really functioning, wondering what her husband had done wrong, that God had taken his voice away. Now, these two women were not in these situations by some genetic accident. They were both pregnant, and they were both chosen by God. These two women chosen by God to be in these circumstances. Mary, the mother of Yeshua, and Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. So I have wondered, why? Why did God choose Mary? Why did God choose Elizabeth? And I think the scripture has a lot to tell us about why God made those choices. Some things that we can learn from the Bible about these two women. And the first thing is that I believe both of these women were incredibly courageous, especially Mary, having to deal with the stigma of being pregnant out of wedlock, and yet being able to go on and live her life, raise her son, raise her family with her head held high. But beyond that, for her to get on a donkey and travel halfway across the country with nobody but her husband over very, very rough terrain, leaving behind her mother, her sisters, her aunts who would have surrounded her when it was time for her to give birth, who would have cared for her. She walked away from all of that, got on that donkey, and made that journey. She had to be a very courageous young woman. And I think they were also women of great strength of character. Again, dealing with the stigma of the two situations that they were in. The people whispering behind their back, that knowing that people were talking about them. And yet, they carried on, and they became two of the most important figures in the New Testament. They were women of integrity. Also, I believe that they were women who were obedient. They were familiar with obedience. Mary never argued with the angel. When he told her what was going to happen, she accepted it immediately. When it was time for Elizabeth to announce the name of the new baby, on the 8 days when it was time for the naming. Of course, her husband couldn't do it because he was mute. And she said his name was going to be John. She endured a great deal of ridicule from family members who said, "You can't do that. You have no name like that in your heritage." And yet she was firm. She was obedient. God had spoken. And the boy's name would be John. And finally, I think that we find that they are prayerful women. Women who are used to having an intimate relationship with the Lord. Some of the most beautiful verses in all of the Bible are those that were spoken by Mary to God when she found out that she was going to be in this incredible, very, very difficult set of circumstances. And yet she raised her voice in praise, as did Elizabeth, raising their voices in praise of God, thanksgiving, magnifying the name of God in the midst of very, very difficult situations. These women were able to obey because they were accustomed to being obedient. So I think even though we more than likely will never end up in those kinds of circumstances that Mary and Elizabeth found themselves in, I think their lives have a lot to teach us in our own personal relationships with the Lord. The importance of courage, the importance of standing up for what we believe, the importance of walking in integrity, the importance of always having the praise of God on our lips, and the importance of being obedient because we are accustomed to being obedient, because we are accustomed to hearing the voice of God and obeying that voice of God. Two very, very unique Jewish women, one young, one old, unique sets of circumstances. And I don't think we can find better examples in all of the Bible.